So we can be timed with everything. Kind of remind what I would call to order. We don't have to vote to go straight. So the first thing is go over the minutes from the last Ed Committee meeting. Folks got a chance to look at those. And
I move we approve the minutes.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. So first thing, we'll start off talking about career and technical. So I don't know who, Matt, you want to...
Yeah, I can jump in. So we have a lot of documents there for you, and thank you to Phil for providing some as well that we saw on when we went to Des Moines this fall and toured some of the campuses there in terms of ag, but we saw a lot more than just ag as well. And so there's a couple documents you have from Central Campus there. Kind of the three categories of things we uploaded for you would be our current course offerings, whether they're in our existing high schools or if they're partnerships we have with the regional center. We also have some information on career pathways, the work that Diane and Pat have done to try to build out what career opportunities would look like for students if they take some of those courses or opportunities they have within our schools. And then kind of the third set of information, you can see it's not necessarily bunched in these three sets, but the third kind of group of handouts would be about some of the state requirements around the regional planning partnership, and that really speaks to a lot of program approvals, so we're happy to answer questions about that tonight. Pat and I have attended those meetings. Pat might have some more specific information that we could try to answer on those, but really the focus of that group has been on making sure those programs are approved, and I think in our portion of the state, we're in a much better position on how we've articulated some of those things out, even though we're going to talk tonight about a little bit of the holes we have in our own CTE programming, but I think we're in a better position than what you find in maybe some other portions of the state as far as getting those programs approved. So I'd kind of just offer that up and see where you guys want to take the conversation. I think I know what I would recommend to you. I think that we need to do with some of our career and technical education programming and what a good first step of it would be, but definitely want to be able to let you ask questions or provide any context you might need around some of those things we provided.
Well, I don't know if the board members or the staff has had a chance to go through all the attachments, and I apologize, I loaded it up. The one that is the Hemingway handout, Des Moines School Central Campus, the one that's the first one by itself that goes all the way across. That one is a yellow sheet that's given out by Des Moines Central Campus, and that shows the freshman, sophomore, junior, senior offerings. And when you look at that, it's a very wide and diverse area, and I strongly encourage everybody to take the time to look at Central Campus in Des Moines. It's a phenomenal facility. The way they have their schedules operated, set up too, it works very well for them as far as their block schedules. The students that go there, they go there for their afternoon courses, and it's Mike Rowe, who has been promoting this type of education, said it's a model for the nation. And it's a phenomenal facility. Their welding facility is awesome. Their automotive area is great. When we were there, their ag department was being renovated, so we didn't get a really chance to view that. But it's been redone. They have a beautiful building downtown. It's very multiple floors, but it's really something I think we should look to strive and model. Their principal is an interesting character just in and of himself. He's
He's from Laos.
He's from Laos. He's a refugee
of Laos.
from the Vietnam War.
With our PD a couple years ago.
Very inspirational individual. And the day we were there was a couple of kids in the welding lab that were offered an internship at Pella, Vermeer, in Pella with Vermeer Manufacturing. They were going to send a bus up, take the kids to Vermeer. They were going to have an internship, and if they successfully completed the internship, they had a job at the end of that internship. And I think that one of the big things they have there is that direct connection to business and jobs after high school. So that's something in our programming. I hope that we get to that point, and as far as aligning our curriculum and things, I think that, reaching out to what they do at Des Moines Central might be something that we can entertain to do, and try and model what we're doing here after that. Now, I think what the home builders are trying to do is kind of that same thing, where in that program this summer, there'll be 2 tracks, where one is the track where the student just takes the course and works on the home build. The other track is if the contractor and the student both agree, there's an opportunity for a summer job on the days when they're not working on the home build. So that, I think in our programming, we should always be looking at opportunities where we can get that direct connection to the employer and everything that way.
Matt, what's the biggest difference between that model and what we partner with Kirkwood and what we offer? I mean, besides it being on one campus.
I think probably just the amount and the variety of things they have. I think also the location of that campus has a little bit to do with, maybe how students are affiliated into the day there. A little bit of some access points for them that are a little bit different than some of the regional stuff. But I mean, they do have, several more programs than what we're able to do at the regional center. They have a lot of different programs. A challenge they've had really though at that campus is probably an equity focus. There's certain types of students, that have traditionally went to Central Campus, and I think that's been a big focus of Mr. Pompasize is how to diversify that, make sure that's truly an opportunity for all kids. And I think obviously we struggle with that here in Iowa City too, right? Making sure that all kids can access that piece. I think the part that he's really been able to tie together is that part Phil was talking about, the community connection to it. So not only do you partake in those programs, but then what's that next step in doing some of that. So I think with our programming, that's really kind of a next phase for us, and I spent a lot of time that day talking to him about how he's tried to accomplish that and some of the work to do that. But for us, we have a lot of good things going on in a lot of different places, but I think our next step is how do we kind of cast a wider umbrella over this and do a review and say, what is working well, what's not working well, how do we make sure all paths are articulated all the way through, that there's an experience, that there's off-ramps and on-ramps for kids at different points that they want to access those things. So I think in summary, what I would say is I think that's really our next step is to do a large CTE review. And we've had a couple individual issues come up with ag and with the home building thing, but I really think we need to look at it globally and say, what do we want to commit to and what makes sense to do where? And we have 3 large high school campuses. How do we want to attack that? Are we going to try to do everything everywhere? Are we going to try to have some programs on some campuses and answer some of those questions instead of continually stepping in and maybe not being 100% sure on how we're going to pull all those things off.
So is this, so none of the other schools have any vote program? Everything's at Central Academy, or?
No. There's still offerings at schools. That's
Okay.
just the specific focus. We went to Southeast Polk in the morning, and the next attachment below is Southeast Polk's offerings.
I think what they do is similar to what would be a reasonable step for us, that some of those entry-level courses happen on the campus of those high schools in Des Moines, but then the more equipment you need or the more technical those courses get, that's where the high-end equipment is, like their culinary program. Well, that's where they have the big kitchen and the mass production pieces, and they don't try to outfit all of their high schools with an industrial-sized kitchen, right?
But they might
do
have
it
like
there.
a intro to foods.
Right, they might have their traditional family and consumer science entry-level classes at the home high school, and then if a student wants to pursue that, then they go to Central Campus to do that back-end experience.
Matt, you had started off saying that you had some recommendations based for our program. Can you dive into those, and then we can stop you as questions come up?
I mean, I think that's kind of what I was saying. That would be the recommendation, is how do we put together a large-scale review and continue to update you guys on that process, and who do we seek out to do that? I trust what Mr. Pompasai is doing there, and he's where I would start to say, would you be willing to come spend some time with us in Iowa City and talk about how you built this out, look at our existing programs, and give us some information on how do we move forward in doing something similar, or how do we, knowing our community and our opportunities here, they're going to look different than Des Moines, right? And so how do we do that? And I think that's what I would recommend is the next step is, that you guys kind of task us with, okay, we want you to do a large-scale review of this and report back to us on the progress for that.
I'm very curious to hear funny, I say, when I was going to school in Des Moines 3 decades ago, Central Campus was, I know you're not going to be surprised, transportation there is a problem, like it always was. 30 years later, we're still talking about transportation issues, so I'd like to hear how they've kind of worked through some of that. But also, back then, it was less vocational and more of the kind of the advanced stuff. Like if you were taking algebra as like a 7th grader or whatever, kind of that double advanced math stuff, that was out there, and other higher end math classes on the top end would be out there. And so it's been a very different transition to what it is now. And so I was kind of curious to how they work through that, like how it's changed over the years to become this, because from my experience with it, it's very, very different. So
It's still there, Sean.
All that stuff is
The
still
advanced
there.
stuff is still there. It's just, it's in the building next to it. And the building that when I talk career and technical, I'm thinking, the industrial arts side, is in the big, tall, old Model A Ford factory, where the different levels, at the top level, they've got a broadcasting station where there's a student-run radio and television studio that produces commercials for, they sold commercial time or made a commercial for the Secretary of State. And did that. There's a radio station at the top where there are students broadcasting. Then they have their marine biology area where they sell jellyfish and coral to Shedd Aquarium in Chicago. Then they have their textile area. They have their commercial kitchen and their cafe, which I went to on my birthday and ate. It was a phenomenal meal. My wife said, you can eat anywhere in the state. Where do you want to go? I said, I want to go to Central Campus and try their cafe. It was a fantastic experience. I encourage everybody to go there. The kids are in the kitchen making it. They manage the cafe. They wait the tables. They do the whole thing. And it's really sharp. The welding facility, when we were there, is extremely impressive. And it's like I say, and I agree with Matt that I think that what they're doing there could really help us in evaluating where we are and try and maximize what's best that we have at our schools, where we have the regional center, and do that. I trust that what they're doing, I think they could be extremely helpful for us in getting ours organized that way. And we have to, for me, it's always been, when you look at career and technical, it's not just a one and done, you take a course and you're done. If you look at some of these other programs that are being done at other schools, you have your building block, you have your welding 1, you have your welding 2, you have your advanced courses you can take. We do those in other subjects, but when it comes to career and technical, it's kind of okay, well, you sample that and that's enough. I really feel we should with Central Campus's leadership, reevaluate and look to where we can get that better experience, so when someone does get to a senior level, if they plan themselves on a track like that, they're in a position where they are job ready or apprenticeship ready. And just like we do on the college track, that we prepare people to go into college and be successful, I think we should be looking at career and technical, so when someone graduates, they can be successful in what they go into.
So I do think they still have some of those challenges from the standpoint that students still have to take a portion of their day. The transportation is something they have to rely on to get over there. They have to transport themselves to get there. So obviously, if you're trying to make up courses, or if there's courses you need at your home campus, you can't be spending a chunk of your day doing this. If you do look at that yellow sheet, they do have a big diversity in offerings there. They're trying to add more programming to that point. So students that can qualify for those courses and things like that, that's still kind of the advanced stuff's still there. It still kind of has that reputation, but I think that's something where, he's constantly looking at, what is their diversity rate there? What's their free and reduced lunch rate? What are those different things? Are we getting to all kids, access to all of those pieces?
Can you just go back to one thing you said was one of the challenges there was I think you said the diversity of the students there, or the makeup of the population there. And I think one thing that maybe we struggle with here too is a lot of the times we have career and tech over here, and we have AP college over here, but really they could be the same students. I mean, there's no reason that someone couldn't be doing both or going,
Of course.
career ready to college.
Right.
So, I don't know, a lot of times talk about as one or the other, college or career tech. But like, what is the challenge there? Well, what do you think we would face as challenges here? That's if we, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I think part of the challenge is just an achievement challenge, so when we know we're not as successful with certain groups of our students, with these courses dual articulated, through college credit, students still have to be able to qualify, they still have to have an interest in those areas, so I think it falls on us to know, our first students interested, just like if we look at our regional center numbers, are we diversifying that group the way we should? So what are those same barriers that we're gonna have to overcome there as well, and making sure that students are accumulating credits and being able to access those opportunities that they want to, whether that's AP, in our Equal Opportunity Schools Initiative, or whether we're talking career and technical education, and knowing that those offerings are for everybody, they're for all kids. And I think with the diversity of their offerings, that's also helped, right? I mean, there's a lot of different things that appeal to a lot of different students there, instead of maybe some traditional, tracks that people would think about, and maybe they would say yes to or not say yes to. So I don't know if that gets at your question, but I think it's probably a lot of the same barriers we talk about in other settings that, are going to be a constant challenge for us as we continue to try to address those.
I think one of the other challenges is just so many hours in the day.
That's right.
And when you have a 7-period day and you need your graduation requirements and everything like that, you're limited, and that might open up a discussion. It's Brady, I think this falls into your category. Should we be having more? Should we be a 9-period day as opposed to a 7-period day? And I think that's.
I was thinking the other way.
Okay. Well. Okay.
I mean, and I guess that's my question is, if you go to a block schedule and you've got, that seems like it'll. So is that what Des Moines does? Do they have a block schedule in all their schools?
Not sure if they're on a block or not. I don't think so.
I don't think they are.
If you
So
add
they
more
do it.
periods, you're going to not have enough time in the other periods. I think
That's a trade-off.
One
Yeah,
interesting
well, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
equity course they had that I just thought about, maybe to follow up on your point, Paul, was this urban leadership offering, and that was I was going to take a group of language arts teachers to see that a couple of years ago, and we never did that, and now it's kind of fallen into this let's look at it globally conversation, but that's where they do like slam poetry, graffiti art, a lot of those different things, and so that's a big draw for them. And so I think they've also been intentional in their offerings to try to make sure they're selecting things that are going to appeal, like I said, to all groups of kids. And you see traditional things like we have like Project Lead the Way on that app or on this list, but then you also see some other ones there that we haven't been able to offer, haven't. And they're really able to take advantage of those economies of scale, like we tried to do at the regional center too, by saying this offering is going to be here. So we draw from 3 different schools, or how many ever high schools they're working with, or for us to draw from those 3 to be able to offer that program.
Scheduling is always going to be a problem, and that's why I'm really hopefully optimistic with how this home building program is going to go this summer. With it being in the summer, students then have the opportunity to devote a day to that build. There's no other course competition at that time, so I think we've got to be imaginative too with this curriculum too, and when we get into a full review and things like that, I think we should be looking at possibly evening classes and weekend classes, that type of a thing, this type of curriculum, just to get past those limitations with how many hours in the day and when students can go.
How many students are they serving there at the central campus?
Not exactly sure.
Oh, gosh.
It's 800.
Is that what it was?
They had to cut from 1,200 to 800.
Okay.
So do they keep all these classes full? Are they offering them all the time? Do they have minimum?
They're turning students away.
Right.
So I think from the programs they're running, enrollment's not an issue for them. Sometimes it's actually, students have to apply to get in.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
have to be accepted, and so that's been part of their effort to make sure the student makeup reflects their schools too.
It's competitive. It's competitive, and they in the conference room we were in, they had and I don't know if you took a screenshot of that, Matt, when we were there, when it had the absences and the staff absence. It was amazing as far as students are there. They're there. They're not absent. They want to be there. The staff is there. They don't want to be there. They're absenteeism, and office referrals and things like that, it's amazing. I mean, everybody that's in that building is there for a purpose, and they it's palpable.
What's Des Moines, how many students do they have in their district?
35,000.
So you're talking, Matt, any recommendations, sort of the systematic approach of looking at it as a bigger picture and lining it all up, and, you know, we've talked about it in the past, and we see that we have the junior high program to studies. Is that, we're talking about trying to include that in this systematic approach, is looking from junior high up in
Yeah, I
high
think
school?
at least
or-
7-12. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to dip into Amy's area here, but I think we at least have to look at it 7-12 wise to say, how are our exploratories we're even doing at junior high complementing what those introductory courses in high school look like, and introducing kids into some opportunities there that they may pursue in high school in that fashion. So I really think for us the challenge is to look at it that broadly and know what our community, you know, offers for resources. Is going to be different than Des Moines. Obviously our scale is different than Des Moines on what we can do, but I also think sometimes we've been a little hard on the regional center aspect, and I think, you know, part of that is that we have responsibility in that 7th through 10th grade to make sure we've articulated very well what those introductory opportunities are, so kids know what they're having an opportunity to pursue at the regional center. I mean, there's a lot of good things there, and our enrollments haven't always been exactly where we wanted to be, but they've climbed every year. You know, we've had more kids interested, more kids see, you know, the advantages of being out there, but I think it's still on us to maximize those opportunities.
Some of this that stood out to me was some of the urban leadership stuff, but then a lot of the educational offerings for kids interested in teaching, I think, and as especially we talked about, you know, minority teacher
Right.
and kind of grow our own.
Trying to do a grow your own.
And that, and also based on the expertise we have here with university, and
Right.
obviously nursing, or healthcare, health sciences would be another big thing for our area.
So could you just talk some more about the handout? Thank you for putting together. I assume you pulled that together very quickly, about the state career tech requirements.
Sure.
Yeah.
Along with that. So this was a presentation that we had shared with the board in the fall of 16, but we have a lot of new board members, so just to kind of take you back through, and that's the PowerPoint, CTE Redesign PowerPoint, that's the doc that's on there. Just to take you back kind of where the house has been and what they've asked us to do. They really decided that we need to look at CTE in two different main divisions. One is the career guidance aspect, and they call that Division 1. And the second is our CTE programming, and they call that Division 2. So when we think about the Division 1, Pat's been doing some work with the guidance counselors. All the schools had to identify a plan that all 8th grade through 12th grade students will need to be able to complete, and that's a career guidance plan. So the state had a list of approved vendors. We looked at those all. We selected the Cte Navigator. So we've been providing some professional development specifically to our guidance counselors on that program. But really what they're asking us to do is look at that broader than just the guidance counselor. So it shouldn't just be the guidance department that is helping students along their career paths. It should be all of our teachers who are familiar with that and can help provide some guidance for students. So we're still just kind of getting familiar with that program, and we have a group of people that are going to get some training in June on that PAT as well. And then the second part of that is looking at our CTE programs, and they redesigned that to kind of bunch the programs in a little bit different manner. So there's 6 main areas. And if you remember, the state requires that every district offers at least 4 of those areas to their students, and you need to offer at least 3 years worth in each of those 4 areas. So currently we are offering business for one of the areas, family consumer science, which is that blue human services area. We offer health services, but do that primarily through the Kirkwood Regional Center. We don't really offer courses at our sites. That's really through Kirkwood. And then the architectural, construction, engineering, industrial tech. So those have been our 4 career tech ed areas, and we're required to offer those. So, and obviously now we're going to expand to that green area. So we're going to add that agriculture area as well. Pat, do you want to talk a little bit more about some of the requirements as far as the academies, the regional planning partnership?
So the push was really making sure students had access to work-based learning experiences and career academies, both of which have been around here for a long time. And I was having a meeting with Diane earlier today, and I said a lot of this was really getting, and Matt said the same thing earlier, the rest of the state kind of caught up to where we are now. You know, we have a lot of students not using the work-based learning or workplace learning experience, but it's available to them if they want to. But those were the big two pushes for Division II. And back to Division I, the thing, it's called a CTE redesign, that the CTE, Division I affects every student in the district, whether they're enrolled in a CTE program or not, because every student is supposed to leave with a career plan. And so it's, you know, it's got the label of CTE, but it really should impact every student in the district.
How are we doing with that?
Well, I mean, the challenge is, how do we move from having it just the guidance counselor's job to having every adult in the building play a role? Because I think most teachers feel like, I know a lot about my subject, but I don't know. And I think not knowing is okay, but knowing where to go to get the information is what people need. So I think the answer's got to be in the advisory, or, you know, this, whatever the school calls that time, and kind of use that to do some career planning during that time. That's my thought on the subject.
That's part of what we're working through now, is how to scale that out and how to do that in a more one-on-one fashion, because like Pat said, it can't just rest with our guidance counselors to try to access all of the students and have a meaningful process put around that. So that's some of the work we're involved in now, and it's kind of funny because that part of some of the work falls with Laura Daly through learning supports in that career academic planning process, and so she works with the group, the post guidance counselors, and Russ Johnson in his work-based facilitator position together to try to figure out how do we do that better. And so they've been meeting throughout the year to do that. I don't think there's a magic solution to it yet, but I think our closest model is to look at an advisory or seminar time where, you know, like a homeroom teacher that could potentially go to that. We haven't rolled that out yet, you know, in a large fashion, but trying to brainstorm how some of that happens. And then at junior high, is there even a different way we should be looking at it? I think, you know, everybody jumps to a course right away is the problem. You know, they want to put it into a class that this is where this should happen and do that. And I try to, you know, caution them with that, you know, is that going to be the best way we can do it, or the most meaningful way we can do it? Is that the only way we can do it? And so we're working through some of those questions now, but that was a big part of that.
Matt, one thing I'm thinking about that might help draw some parallels for them is if they're real familiar with I Have a Plan.
Right, yeah, so this is what I Have a Plan was, and now we'll move to this Cte is the name of the system we're using. So there was different ones we could have chosen, and that's the one we went with. So if your students, or if you're familiar from being in school, that I Have a Plan in Iowa, the state no longer was going to continue to support that for all districts, so you could continue to use that as a version of it, but there were some other programs that offered probably a better platform for us to do this work.
So we've gone from I have a plan to I have a career.
I have a plan to
I have a career.
Yeah.
You know, change it to that.
What are some of the elements that you are doing right now? I know it's a work in process, but what are some things? I'm just thinking, like, I know that there's some career testing that goes on, not testing really, but, you know, exploration type things.
Yeah, they're doing some
junior
assessments to
year,
see
but
where their interests match up with which careers, and what are the educational requirements, what are the characteristics, what's the pay, are there jobs available? You know, some of that is built into this system, but, you know, the place we need to go is for someone to sit down with that kid and say, okay, you're expressing interest in pharmacy, but I see you're taking the minimum in math, the minimum in science. I'm not sure that's the way you want to, you know, finish out high school, and that's the part we got to figure out.
I think the tricky thing a little bit, Lori, is, you know, Phil talks about it not being a one and done, but on some level, we don't want it to be a one and done, but we want kids to be able to try an experience. If they don't like it, they can switch before they get to college and start paying money and then figure out they want to switch. But the state measures us on completers still, you know, and so completers are when you take that sequence of courses. And so that's a delicate balance for us to find right now, is how do we expose kids to a number of opportunities where they can maybe make a selection that helps them post-secondary wise or career wise, but then also trying to meet this completer requirement for some of that funding purposes. So that those two things haven't really matched up very well for us yet.
Because I'm just thinking of, so I have a junior, and the testing is coming up here in April, I understand, from the guidance counselor. He's already registered for his classes for next year.
Yeah. There's a good
He can
example.
change his classes, but, you know, he's got 3 years under his belt already. Kind of feels like it might be too late.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's saying to me, how am I supposed to know what I'm going to do? I'm 17 years old. I mean, which is a normal reaction. I'm just wondering, it sounds like our work in progress is to start it earlier, start that process before
Right.
the junior year.
And I think
maybe
if the
that's not
state thought
only
districts were
thing.
doing this well, they probably wouldn't have passed the legislation and put a lot of
Good
this work
point.
to us, right? So I think there's
Right.
things we recognize as we go through too, and part of it's where do you fit it in? You know, we have all the subjects and all the content areas we're trying to teach, and then to do this career and academic planning piece, where does that fit in our system, and where does that responsibility fall, and how do we get that out? So that is a honest challenge for us. It's something we're trying to figure out. So it's not a junior, and I have to pick a major pretty soon and figure all these things out, and I haven't had a diverse experience to know what I want to do.
Well, and two, I know when my daughter was going through junior high, when they were doing that planning your high school schedule, there was a serious discussion with the parents and the students that, okay, if you're going on a college track, you've got to be taking, these courses, got to have a foreign language, all of those things. That's a time too that we should, and tomorrow, or I should say Thursday of this week, there'll be a busload of students going from Weston City to the Steam Fitters Union facility up in Cedar Rapids, and those guys will say too, says, look, you better have taken geometry and you better have taken physics. And that's an important thing too, that kids know in junior high when they're planning their high school schedules, that even if you are looking to go into some of these fields, those courses are very important to pursuing those career paths. So I think the sooner we get that discussion happening and everything, and even at the junior high level, is very important.
I have the 15-year-old freshman who doesn't, usually give out a lot of information when I ask him how about his day, but he's taking the futures class right now, and he's very excited. He's getting to do a job shadow here coming up. I don't know a lot about the class. I'm trying to tease it out of the 15-year-old. So can you just tell me a little bit? Because it sounds like this is sort of get you an idea of what you're.
It's a job-getting, job-keeping course, basically. It's what do you need to get a job, and then what skills do you need to keep that job? In a very general, kind of the soft skills that everyone needs, no matter where they're headed. I mean, in a nutshell, that's kind of
It's not giving them aspects to different careers necessarily. Just
there is a little career exploration, but it's primarily about how do you get a job, how do you keep a job.
I think it's a really solid course, and that's the one I referenced when I said, the easy solution is to say, well, let's have everybody take futures. I think that was the topic of a lot of our last ICAP meeting with Laura and, pulling the guidance team together. Well, that's a huge undertaking, right? I mean, to get every single kid through the futures course and add that as a graduation requirement. We've had this conversation with you before about a different course, right? And so there's some of those things that are important elements there, but I also think we have to look at, what's a realistic solution for us to do this work and to embed it in the work we're doing and to try to look at those. So it's not that we won't continue to have that conversation, but we had a couple of the futures teachers there talking about the elements of that class and the benefits of that. So there's a lot of good things embedded there. I think we're just still in the planning stages to figure out how do we do this best and most effectively. And maybe it's a junior high, maybe we'll rethink our junior high exploratories, through a redesign process. We start to look at something different there. I think we need to be willing to put a little bit or all of this on the table in a sense and say, what's the best way we could do this, knowing what the most options possible.
I think the soft skills stuff I think is very important. I mean, it was on my son to set up his job shadow, and hearing him get on the phone and call a business owner and say, here's my story, and I want to come job shadow with you, I was like, who's this kid on the back? Right? It was not my experience with my son. So there
he have
was
his-
something there for sure on how to just present themselves.
Did he have his
That was-
script?
They come home with
Yeah.
a piece of paper saying, here's some things you want to make sure you cover.
That's
It
one of the
wasn't
things
so
they do
much
with
a
it. My son went through that
script,
too, and he went through and wrote it
but it was-
all out.
He's very excited about the job change.
Did this legislation come with any funding?
Yeah, want to talk about the funding with the
Oh,
partnership?
Yeah, it's hardly worth mentioning. It's money that it's been moved around.
They took it out of one pocket and gave it back to
Exactly,
us and said,
exactly.
hey, here's some money. I'm like, that's great.
Rewrapped it, so
Yeah.
it's not really.
Okay.
So Matt, having our program evaluated, is there a cost to that? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd be
estimate?
looking at, we can do some of it internally, but I do think we'd be wanting to look at, is there a consultant type person or another district we'd want to try to bring in and, at some kind of cost to do that. But, I think there's obviously an element we're committed to working on internally, but then also I think it'd be good for us to learn and try to see how somebody else has taken on this and pulled those pieces together instead of trying to figure out our own way throughout the whole process too.
So who would that, for example, who would be a good person to do that, or what?
Well, I'd start with
Who does that?
I'd start with the guy in Marshall, or in Des Moines.
In Des Moines and have
Yeah.
him come out.
I mean, I think that would be our first phone call, and he could put something together for us and say, this is, I don't know if he has time to do it or not, but he'd be the first one I'd ask and say, if maybe he has a recommendation to somebody else too. But I think that would be a good starting point for us to, since he's been through the work and done it and
Yeah.
made those connections with his own local leaders. I think that'd be a good step for us.
Well, I definitely think that's what we should be doing, is looking into that, analyzing where we're at. I think we all kind of know where we want to go, and we, and it'll be, scale is important, and then understanding our area. But my belief is we've got a lot of untapped potential with our industry, various industries, education, healthcare, and the trades. But there's a lot of potential here. And we just want to connect those dots. And then I think the earlier we start, the better. I mean, if we can, I don't want to ask a kindergartner, seriously consider a career. The truth is, frankly, there's not a lot of 18. I mean, I work with teenagers all the time. And the ones that really have an idea of what they want to do are maybe 10% who really have an idea. Many of them are like, what are you going to do when you graduate? Go to college? Well, why? I don't know. I mean, that's the most common answer. So I think the earlier we get kids thinking, because the truth is, it doesn't really matter what you do. Those soft skills are always going to be important. You're probably going to need to take geometry. And to help kids answer that question, like, why do I need to learn this? I believe we owe them an answer, other than, well, that's what the University of Iowa requires. I think we have to be able to say, this is how, just generally, I think we all have to be better at, this is how this content is applicable to you as an adult, and this is why it's important. And if we can't answer that question, then I think we have to ask ourselves, why are we teaching it if we should have an answer? So
They
the
say
more we
college
do
because
it-
they know they need something and they think it's the right answer, but
Right.
it's our job to show them what that means.
What
or
does it mean to you?
What are
Yeah.
those other pieces? So,
Right,
yeah.
right. And I think the earlier we start with soft skills and we start with career exploration, I can imagine having a class in junior high that sort of covers lots of bases, so kids at least are introduced to what is cybersecurity? Why might that? I mean, I think in the years I've been teaching, and I know how big computers are, I've met 2 kids who have real aspirations to go into one of the biggest fields that exists in anything dealing with computers, data mining or cybersecurity. Like, that's not even real to them, and it's like a huge field that we can't fill all the jobs in nationally. So, I'd love to see us have a real robust, really starting in kindergarten, how this all leads up to preparing kids to be citizens in the 21st century. And I don't know that there has to be it's like you shouldn't start thinking about this until you're 14. I mean, it's just kind of a process of being a student. It's kind of like Avid is for college and scholars. Well, what's the language of being a citizen? Or what's the language of being somebody who's going to have a job someday? Or what does that sound like to kids? And what soft skills are we teaching them that are going to help them? Whether you're a welder or a doctor, there's some skills that are very similar for people to be successful. Any other questions, or do we have a?
So if I'm hearing you right, so you'd be supportive of us working to try to find somebody that would assist us with the review. We kind of bring you back what some potential terms or some parameters of that review might look like, knowing these are kind of the three big buckets we've talked about today. We think some of that, obviously that Division 1 and 2 work is happening internally in the district, but I think more importantly for us, it's talking about those local community connections, knowing our program offerings, and how do we start to pull those things together. So if that's what I'm hearing you say, we would definitely bring that back at whatever timeline you want us to and start making some connections with folks to do that.
I know that's you have around.
And I'm interested, a gentleman in Des Moines, if having worked through whatever hurdles, and I assume they have hurdles every year, but they probably have run into bigger snags than we will come up with as we do it ourselves, as we sit around the table and talk about all the stuff we're going to do. So someone to say, you're going to run into this, make sure you're thinking about that as you're trying to do this process, I think is very valuable information for us so that we can get ahead of some of those obstacles instead of just tripping over them every time we run into them. So I think it's good to bring someone in that has that experience already to give us some sort of guidance. Then we can go from there.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. And just my take being there 2 times and talking with him, I think that, yeah, he's definitely someone we should be talking to, because I think he would help us tremendously.
Got it.
Great.
Good.
And if I can jump, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. I just had one last thing, and I had to leave that joint entities thing early yesterday, so I don't know if Kelly mentioned this, so I just want to make sure the rest of the board was aware. Kelly Hayworth, the city manager of Coralville, stopped me yesterday and was bringing to my attention that City of Coralville is competing on the FFA convention for the next 4 years, starting in 2020. So it would be the first year we have a chapter. So that's just a little interesting side note. He was really interested. They're in the running and selected. And in fact, we have a bus going to the state convention Monday, the 23rd, with students to get them interested in that. And there'll also be a contingent from Coralville wooing the FFA convention to Iowa City. So the 2020, the spring of 2020 might be a lot of fun for us if we could get the convention. Our students could be the hosts the first year we have the program.
Pretty exciting.
And Matt, just one thing before we move on. Well, I know you're talking about the place in Des Moines and reaching out and kind of researching it, but I'd also be real interested in finding places where underrepresented students have been successful and are succeeding in programs, and what we can do look into that as well.
And so then one parallelism from the conversation we were just having, we have some students from Southeast that have requested the opportunity to come in and present to the board on computer science. They've done some pretty extensive survey work with their students, and I talked to the 2 gentlemen that did that and said that we had our ed committee meeting tonight. So as you think about agenda setting, right now we only have one topic for May. And if you would be interested in inviting them in, we're also doing some work on our pathways with computer science. We've got some work underway right now where we're applying for a grant, which is actually gives us potentially the opportunity to work K-12 with computer science in our classrooms. And so we thought that might be in line with our focus on career and tech ed. And if that's something you're interested in when we get to agenda setting, might be something that we would want to put on our May agenda.
All right, anything else on career tech ed? Thanks everybody for presenting, bringing that information.
That sounds right.
So we'll move on to restorative justice.
I'm not Kingsley,
I know.
but I'm self-informed today.
Okay.
They have a city council meeting with some national historic landmark designations, which he said might run a little hot, and so it was all hands on deck for city council. So what I shared with him was that I would pass this information on to you, give you a little bit of a summary of some of the things that we are working on that are underway, some things that we see as potentially next steps for us as a district, and collect questions for him that he could then get back to you. So,
Rick Hancock is here too, so if we want to hear a little bit about kind of circles and how that plays into restorative justice, but maybe a little generally.
I think that's a great idea. So just in terms of some of the work that's going on right now, we're formally providing training at Kirkwood, Northwest, and Southeast. But you'll also see things going on in other buildings in the district, especially at the elementary level. One of the things that we've worked really hard on at some of our elementary schools is the role of using check-ins at the beginning of the day. So if you go to our elementary schools, I know actually my son did his job shadow as a teacher, and one of the things that he came back with is he got to see a check-in circle at Weber Elementary with a 6th grade class, and he said, I wish we had that when I was a kid. I wish we had that when I was in 6th grade, because it's a great opportunity for community building, for students to sometimes unload some things that they need to get out of the way so that they can focus on teaching and learning for the rest of the day. And that was the one thing that he talked about when he came back, was just how powerful doing that check-in was at the beginning of the day. I thought that was interesting in light of the career piece and this focus right here. So there are some things that are going on informally in some of the other buildings as we're going through that growth process, but the formal process right now, Kirkwood, Northwest, and Southeast. Kingsley provided just a quick summary on what is restorative justice, how does it work, and then I think probably one of the most important pieces is on the back. And it's one of the things that we are continuing to work with on staff, is to understand how we're working with the other side of the process. So if you're reading that paragraph on the back, how we are working to move away from the punitive role of discipline and really work on understanding the victims that are involved in the situation and what processes, practices, and things need to be done in order to repair the damage that's been done and allow them to move forward. It looks very different. So Rick, I know you've presented and had some conversations with DPO and others, and since you're here, if you want to just chime in and share a little bit with us, that'd be awesome.
What do you want to know?
So maybe just talk, I mean, I think we have folks who, are kind of new to it's new, this circle thing is pretty new to a lot of us. And how, I guess maybe how it got going here, and then what you've been doing, and then what the staff and student response has been, and then what you're seeing as a result.
And if I could just offer, while he's going through that, if you have questions, please raise those. One of the things that I shared with Kingsley was I will try to gather as many questions as possible so we can get answers for you moving forward. So, thanks.
Well, how we got started here, this is sort of my own personal pursuit to kind of do better. I work with special education here. I tend to work with the students with behavioral and emotional issues. And over the years, some of the conventional things you've been taught and learned in school just don't work. Cause a lot of frustration. So I finally have been looking for somebody that could actually talk about circles and actually be trained in that process. I've been looking for that for quite a while, and then this last fall, mediation services over at the old church over there by Amy Tucker had put this out about training, so I went. And it was a 3-day training, 8 hours a day, you sat in circle. Best training I've ever done, anywhere. And came back that I would have they did 2 trainings. They did it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Quite frankly, I would have stayed for the other 3 days and sat another 8 hours for 3 days. It was that good. Cte Redesign was the trainer. She's a national trainer. She was awesome. I came back the next week. I went to Molly's office and said, hey, I found what I want to do. And so I explained what would happen, and I said I'd like to try it with maybe some staff and kind of feel it out. And so she said, no, that'd be great. Go ahead and go for it. So we had about 12 staff members. I sat down and just did. The tough thing about restorative practices sometimes, or circular process, is it's an experiential thing. I could try to describe it to you, and it's not the same thing. It's just not. But I can, if you want to hear questions about it, I'll try. So through that process, the staff that were involved came away giving me good feedback on that. And we did that the week before Christmas break. When we came back, we did another one in January. At the end of the first, one of our teachers said the next day, she goes, I want you to try this with class. I went, sure. And the reason for that was after she'd been through the circle, she felt we had a class here, freshman behaviors, large class, just some low-level behavior stuff that she felt the teacher that she was working with, she's also an IES person, was working with, probably could use some help. She thought, maybe let's try this. Let's just try this out. Okay. So we met with that group, and there's some challenges to that, and I'll go into those challenges a little later. We met a total of 9, we had 9 circles. By the end of that process, the teacher reported, the kids reported that the classroom ran smoother. They felt there were better relationships formed for the students. And they felt that they really didn't need to want to do that process anymore. But at the end of our last circle, and this kind of shows you the power of it, I think, is I struggle with this. I'll come back to that for a second. So we did these circles with the 9th grade group. Then one of our other teachers, that's part of our circle, does AP French. And she goes, let's try that with an AP French class. Okay. So we just did 3 there, and it was for no behavioral reasons. She just wanted to develop a better rapport amongst the students, create better relationships amongst the students. Because one of the things she said she found in that AP French class was they didn't like to present in front of each other. They were very sensitive to criticism. I learned a lot more once we got there. But she wanted them to be comfortable with each other. And so that's all we did. We just did some relationship building stuff. We did 3 circles consecutively, which I think was pretty good. And that was right at the end of the trimester. And we haven't had another one since, but I've always left that open. And then finally, what I'm doing now is our science teacher, one of our science teachers, another freshman class, 30 kids, also want to try a circle. So the Friday before and last Friday here, we've had 2 circles with them. Again, it's just basically she'd like to see the class more function as a group, as opposed to a bunch of individuals. And so we've just started that process with them. Every time I do it, I learn something. I'm learning what the challenges are, really what the cool things that can happen out of it. And Jake, we invited JP to one of the staff circles. You could speak to, I guess, how you felt about the circle. Everybody comes away with their own experience with it. You mentioned the restorative justice piece. A lot of people think about the conflict resolution piece, but they always go to that first. What I'm doing is like if you think about like MTSS, the pyramid structure, the things that we're doing are at the bottom. Lots of relationship building. I think if you focus a lot of attention there, the amount of times you have to go to the conflict resolution, causing harm, less often. So my dream is to have West High be a completely restorative type of building. Have the teachers trained in it. There's no special person that has to do the circle. They just need to be trained in the process. There's learning circles. You can perform class in a circle. You can, if there's an issue, if you have a behavioral issue in class, you can have the circle resolve the issue right there in the class, with the class. And those things that are more severe, or then you move on to a better process. I think if you establish the relationship piece first, when you have to go to that next level, students already know what the process is. It's not some add-on thing, weird thing. It feels weird at first, I'll guarantee you. You almost have a circle here, almost. But it does feel weird at first. But once the kids experience it, there's some that choose not to do it. One thing about Circle is also that it's voluntary. You can't force Circle on anybody. If they choose not to do it, they choose not to do it. And you have to choose a different route on how to what you want to go about doing it. So that's really just sort of a scatter.
And we did one right after that winter break one, when this was starting to ramp up over here. We did one of those down at the ESC. We had, I'd say, about 2/3 of the admin team was able to carve out the time to, and we went through a long one. We had, it was a couple hours.
I should say 3 hours.
3 hours. I mean, we went through a really long one, and
Who facilitated that? Was it?
Laura facilitated
Okay.
it. And the thing that, I'll tell you, one of the things that struck me about it was we're so busy that sometimes it's really hard to understand what the root cause is when you're dealing, especially with relationships, because there's so much to do all the time, and it's really easy to do a lot of drive-by stuff with relationships. If you're doing a 3-hour circle, there's no drive-by in there. I mean, phones are off, you're present, which we're not always present. And it was a different experience, I think,
Yeah.
for all of us.
I appreciate what Rick said about the focus not being just on the conflict resolution piece, because really if you spend the time on the relationship component first, and if there's some kind of foundational piece to that, I think people that have heard about it in the district jump right to it's this conflict resolution. Well, yes, it's used for that, and it can be very effective for that, but I know it's gotten muddied in some places in our district that, you know, there's absence of consequences now because we're doing these conflict resolution pieces. And, you know, I don't even necessarily like Kingsley's first statement about the shift away from punitive discipline, or it's not that we still don't do discipline, but I think the opportunity is, yes, we're going to have clear and consistent consequences for kids, but if we really want to impact long-term change in the conflict, we know we have to go beyond those clear and consistent consequences. We can't just consequence. We have to do this repair work too and teach them how to do that in a different setting. And so there's power in that conflict resolution piece, but there's also a baseline, so thanks for sharing that.
I would say it's much harder. Somebody going through, it would be much easier just I think on the offender end, it's much easier to be suspended or detention, whatever.
Exactly.
It's
much
done
harder.
to you,
Yeah.
not with you.
Right. Well, and the other thing too is you teach, you talk about soft skills, right? You teach accountability, how to apologize, forgiveness, things that I think we just assume kids just know. Or because they're 17, 18, 16 years old, they should just know it. They don't. They really don't. Like one of the assumptions I made about the AP class is those kids all have it together. They're AP kids, man. They're doing this and that. And I came away from that group, they're miserable. They're not happy kids. It was just a relief for them to sit and have a conversation and not be, they're overscheduled. You just learn those sorts of things. I've learned other things in the circles. Students are fearful.
So, do you think you could share that story? That
I'll try
to get through.
Yeah. So, out of that big circle I told you, that 9th grade group, we did our agreements for the class. That went rather quickly. I wasn't expecting that. And so, we had like 15 minutes up to the class. And so I said, well, we'll just go ahead and close the circle. The teacher said, yeah, we can just go back and we can just let you guys can do some things and whatnot. So in circle, you have to have an agreement. So I said, I'm going to close the circle. One of the girls asked for the talking piece. Question, why? So she asked if people who are interested wanted to stay. I said, sure. And so out of that 28 class, about 12 students decided to stay. Now part of me is thinking, 15, 20 minutes left, I want to really go back to class, got lunch next, right? So I just passed the talking piece to her, so what do we want to talk about? And I was just expecting, something. And she said school shootings. So they had a conversation on school shootings. Basically just to express how they felt about it. This was just right after, like the week after of the A lot of emotion, a lot of anger, a lot of fear, a lot of questions. And we didn't really come to any conclusion. That really wasn't the way. It was just let them talk. I passed quite a bit. Quite frankly, I just let it continue. I had a couple of questions here and there. We were done. I said I wanted to honor everybody's time. Tell us about your language or your final statements. They'd like to meet again. I said, sure. I said, I'll have to talk to the teacher because we have to take up to class time. And this is one of the challenges is, you know, particularly for this thing, this type of deal, we have to take some class time. I said, so we'll have to work that out. So I let it go at that. We left. And what was really cool about it is the kids didn't let me wait too long. They came back to me. So I tried to run the fast track. I met with the teacher. The teacher said, no, that'd be great. He sees the value of the process. So but the trade-off was that they could come to the circle, but they were responsible for the homework. So, you know, that's just, you know, so everybody can decide. It wasn't just, oh, I want you to know too, it wasn't just open to those 12. Anybody in that class who wanted to be part of that, and I let the kids go, you know, share this if you want them to come. I said, would you mind if I asked Miss Abraham to come? I said, because some of the things you talk about, I think somebody, you know, higher up the food chain than me probably should hear some of this. And I think she would really want to hear what you have to say. They said, no, sure, that'd be great. So Miss Abraham came. Actually, one of our other teachers that are in our circle asked if she could come, and again, you have to ask permission. They welcomed any other adult that could listen to them to be heard. And so we held a second circle. And you'd have to ask Molly kind of what she came away with that, because you know they voiced a lot of the things, and Molly had some questions for them. So that was just sort of just came out of the blue. It wasn't a planned thing, which I think was really cool, and I think that's the self-sustaining thing of circles. You know you're doing it, I think, when kids are starting to be able to hold their own. And I think the high schools can't be left out of that process. I didn't know how much extensive work the junior highs and elementary schools were having. I had a conversation with Lori Bauer last week, and it kind of took me aback. Like, oh my God, really, you guys have been doing, you know, so it's like, but I know none of the secondary schools really haven't really looked into this. I did go over, I should mention that 2 of the members of our circle were also Liberty teachers. And so I did go over there one time and just on a small scale offer it over there, just to give the Liberty staff maybe something to think about.
Maybe one thing I'll share with you from the elementary piece too. I know, you know, Rick said it takes time. If you talk to the elementary teachers who are doing this with fidelity and are doing these elementary check-ins, especially these morning check-in meetings with the kids, they'll tell you that they get that time back during the day because the relationships that are built and the mutual accountability that the kids have changes the behavior in the classroom. So where you might otherwise experience issues that crop up over the course of the day, either those things don't happen or the students actually are becoming more mutually accountable, and so they're willing to talk to their peer who may be off task instead of waiting for the teacher to have to do that. And so that tends to cycle people back to teaching and learning quicker. So every teacher that I've talked to that's doing that as part of their morning process tells me that they get that time back later in the day instructionally because the kids are more centered and focused during the day. And it's about those relationships that they build not only with their teacher, but with each other, the things that they're able to say that help them hold each other accountable and help them remember the things that sometimes kids forget in the heat of the moment. And so then you've got a peer that brings it up with you as opposed to the teacher. So I think we get really positive feedback if we had our elementary folks that are implementing sitting here with us too.
Yeah, that's definitely what I heard as well. I love that idea about that we hold each other accountable rather than this idea of a kid being like a tattletale. That now it's just kids holding one another accountable because we're all a part of a community, and there the community is a classroom. And I think, you know, why these kids feel comfortable is you really attempt to create a safe space in that circle, and you feel comfortable talking about things that maybe you wouldn't otherwise. And the, just the process, the way it works, there's a, you just kind of bring the circle together, and then there's a talking piece, and you pass that, and the expectation is that you'll either sit with that and just hold it, or you'll say something, and then the expectation is that everybody's listening, and they're listening to whoever has that talking piece, or you can pass. But even by passing, you're still participating, you're still important, and it really sends the message and the feeling that every single person is important, and everybody's on the same level. It's not like I'm the adult teacher telling you what to do, but I'm here with you, and we're doing this together, and it's a community, and it is hard. It's hard to explain. It's not, but when you experience it, it's not hard. It becomes very apparent very quickly that it's a very powerful tool that, again, I think it just gets at a lot of the things that we're talking about, whether it's going to be, I get that time back, so my reading instruction is going to be better throughout the day, and my kids are going to be more attentive, I have fewer discipline problems, and then hopefully we see, the disproportionality come down, because it's just, rather than we think about all the things we've done, and I don't mean we as the district, nationally, with testing and curriculum for 30 years, really, with very little needle movement on any of our big metrics, certainly regarding disproportionality, that something like this that's just on a fundamental level, very different than the old, I will tell you what to do and you will listen to me because I'm the adult, and then there's no further discussion. If you're not willing to be a part of that, I will exclude you from the process. And that's the model, that's all education really has done, except in maybe pockets. And that probably works for 80, 75%, 80% of kids. Probably for those kids, anything would work. There are probably kids who, they'll follow whatever system, but we know for sure that there's that group of kids that what we have been doing hasn't been working in any appreciable way. So and again, I don't want to get to the place where the board says, great idea, starting in 1920, everyone will be, because it's this experiential thing, and when people experience it, now I have buy-in, and now I want to go do it. And I think this thing, like you said, Rick, when the kids come and ask you, or they just do it themselves, I mean, what else do we want in education but to teach something, and then they just go do it, and we just sit back and watch it happen. I mean, that's really beautiful and powerful. So, thanks for sharing. That was a good, since Kingsley's not here, who's had a lot of experience with this.
Well, one thing I will share with you is that we've had conversations about this, is kind of what's next for us. And whether it's, right now it's been kind of a grassroots process, whether it's you going out and working on Liberty, or when we did our PD day in October, that was one of the sessions that for the elementary teachers, that's one of the sessions that they could attend, and it was packed. I mean, I went to go see it because I'd seen one in action, and there wasn't any room in the classroom. You couldn't get in there. So if you wanted to go hear about it, you had to wait because there wasn't enough space in that section. We'd like to offer it more systemically and systematically so that people who want to be exposed to it have the opportunity to participate, because I think participating is the first process. By the way, anecdotally, the first time I saw it, I was in a classroom to just go observe. So I was going to observe it. You can't observe it. So I had to go sit with them on the floor, which is not what I was just figuring I'd hang out in the back, and they'd go through their morning circle, and they're like, no, you got to come sit with us. And now it's your turn to talk.
What was that group, Steve?
It was third graders at Alexander, and I'm like, now it's your turn to talk. And I'm like, okay, what am I sharing here? Because they all knew the routine there, and I knew to do it, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. But we really want to make sure that teachers who are interested have the opportunity to experience it, that once they've experienced it, they have the opportunity to go through some training, so if they want to put it in play, they can. If there are places where it's working well, we want people to be able to go see it in action. We know that it's about relationship building, but it also, from a restorative justice standpoint, has an ability to have perhaps a significant influence, especially at the top of our MTSS tier when we're dealing with discipline. And so our next steps, as we've talked about this, is how do we take something that's working well and actually provide a structure for it so that as a district we can support it. So those are our next steps.
I think so.
Now, one of the,
Probably can't do that
You
unless the
can.
circle is 3.
I did. So we already talked about this, and I talked to Kingsley about it today. We can certainly do that, and there is for it to work well, you have this, use the word safety, right? It's a safe place to talk. So certainly we would want to provide that to you. In groups of 3, we can definitely do that.
Could we do it at a board retreat or something? I mean.
You could, but that's still an open meeting. And
It's
sometimes
recorded
that-
and minutes.
Yeah, so yes, you could, but yes, definitely in groups of 3, we could certainly do that.
Yeah, I would recommend it, even if you're able to do it singly, like I did with West Staff, or groups of
Yep.
3 or 2. I mean, we just did a couple, I mean, Alan, you were there, we did some circles at the at the equity community, and you were there in a circle. And that was probably a little less, it was a little more informal and it wasn't like, I mean, that's a public meeting, and there was
Yeah,
other
you
people
don't
there,
have the
but
depth, maybe.
But it worked, and we did it, and there was just having conversations around those issues. So it's, very much recommend experiencing it and seeing what
You're all
difference
invited
it
on
can
if
make.
you want, if our next staff, and if you want. Come.
And I will just have to put the plug in for, I taught in a temp for many, many years, but not like Rick's temp. He's got bathrooms. It's like a beautiful, frankly, beautiful space, but I'm just
We got lucky.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you giving me the time to talk about it, because I'll talk about this all day. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Yep.
So if there's anything that we didn't address as part of the conversation, I tried to capture some of it, but if there's other questions you have, please make sure you let me know. I'm happy to relay those back to Kingsley, and like I said, he apologized for not being here, but I think many of us on the admin team have had the opportunity to see it in action, so I think we've got a contextual understanding of it too, which I think helps as we look forward.
Yeah, finding ways to expand it out systematically for teachers and staff would be.
Well, to have a packed PD,
Yeah.
that's huge, right?
Well,
Just
listening to
saying.
the elementary teachers talk about how it changed their day, and they said the most powerful one is Monday morning. Because Monday morning the kids come back and they've got 2 days worth of stuff that they need to unpack before they can start teaching and learning.
And when you think about trauma-based stuff, I mean, instead of beginning your day like frustrated with a kid because they didn't get their pencil and running in late, and now you're mad at them, and then that sets off the chain of events that leads to the kid getting sent home that day. Now you're giving every kid an opportunity to say, I got some stuff going on. Before I start, let me just get this off my chest. And then it becomes such, with kids, it just becomes a natural process, and they're going to incorporate that. And that's pretty exciting. See, one thing I'm interested in, Steve, is what's the data out there as far as if there's any hard data nationally or places where they've done this where we've seen, very interested in suspensions, juvenile justice. Is there anything from the juvenile justice world?
It's pretty thin.
Okay.
Right now. I think a lot of
Probably
it's
'cause it's so new.
anecdotal,
Yeah.
information on, like Steve said, how teachers talk about it changes their classroom and how things feel different. But since it is relatively new in implementation, as far as the research basis, and honestly, that's the thing, that's difficult for us to answer sometimes when people ask, well, why are you doing this? Where's the research behind it and that type of thing. And so we'll continue to look for it. We'll continue to ask the question, but it is limited.
And maybe if you just, instead of looking in education, go to juvenile. I think I've seen more of it on the juvenile justice side with probation officers and that sort of thing, as far as prison recidivism and that kind of
Okay.
thing. It could be.
I'll see what we can find.
Good idea.
But I still think it's probably but sometimes those prison reformers have some more easier to do controlled experiments.
Truly.
Really?
Compliance method.
Oh.
But it's there. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it does create some good data-driven stuff.
I was gonna say, I'm very interested in experience in it, and as Rick was talking about, teacher wants the group to just work better, work better as a group. I think about, they said we also have almost a circle there, our square, we call it the square. I feel that when we have like the ed committee meetings or other meetings, we're having this conversation, right? And I think relationship building is when you're having conversations, that someone's talking and everybody else is listening. You talk about that's what it's like in the circle. And I feel that when we're in this situation, we have more active listening happening, and the conversation ends up going somewhere. And sometimes, you know, when we're sitting at the board table, it's my turn to talk, now your turn to talk, now it's your turn to talk, and that's it, right? But it's not that we're not listening to each other, but I don't know that we're participating in a conversation all the time. And I think we're more constructive here, and I see that's sort of the natural progression. I think this would need to be a deeper push that way, and I think that would be good for all of us to be able to communicate with each other and actively listen to each other better. And I mean, definitely should try and it is. Unfortunately, we can't do it as a whole group, because I think that would be very beneficial. If we did all together. Stupid rules.
We could do it in an exempt session, couldn't we? No?
We were talking about like Steve's evaluation.
There you go.
We'll
make a good topic.
We'll make that a circle.
All right, so anything else on that or any questions? And I suppose we can email them.
Yeah,
too.
please do if you've got any other feedback.
And maybe the big question would be to find out where people are doing them and if there are ones we could be invited to. I know Rick just offered that out to everybody at West. And, that is a good one, and it's a good group of people who are comfortable with the process, and it's very close, like all of it. So agenda setting, we've definitely got preschool on the May 15th item, and then this opportunity we have Southeast students come. Anytime we can hear from the kids, I just...
They got a great survey. They thought that there wasn't a forum for them, so they were going to present during community comment at the April 24th meeting, and they sent me their slide deck already, which is really well done. And I looked at it and thought, 4 minutes is probably not going to work for that. So then we had some dialogue about what other opportunities there are, and they were really excited about being able to come to the Ed Committee meeting and share the survey with you.
Is Hills
I was just going to
Is
say,
she
logistically,
on?
can we get?
I don't. I would imagine it's probably not. We'll check. I'm sure we can figure that out for them.
Yeah, let's find out that logistic piece.
Yeah, I'm sure we can get that solved for them.
Yeah. Anything else to talk about? What's in May? And then we don't, Ed Committee doesn't meet June, July, August?
It's not in the past.
It's not, okay. So May, anything else? And then September, we're looking at athletics. And then we also had something on in October.
There's something else
I don't know that we did October. I thought we went to athletics in September.
No, athletics in September. I went through something else. Was it?
I'll have to go back and look. I thought there was another topic for September, but I can't remember what it was.
Well, we'll figure it out then. But we know we've got preschool and this Southeast Junior High computer presentation. And then, wow, that's school year. Anything else? Anything motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye.